Hey, what's up guys? Alex here with a new video, and today we're going to be talking about the Canon EOS R5 from a wedding photographer's perspective. Now, if you're watching this video, I also did make a video on my thoughts on the Canon EOS R6 and why I think that camera is the perfect wedding photographer's camera. Now, the EOS R5, am I picking one up? Yes. Do I think it's a perfect wedding photographer's camera? Maybe, right? This camera is a camera to rule all cameras, right? Canon literally threw everything they could at this camera, and it has insane specs. I can't really say it's a perfect wedding camera because it is overkill, right? Like a lot of these features you do not need, and the price point is also you're paying for those specs. Now, this is the first camera that I think has launched in the last 5 years that I can genuinely say is future-proofed. Like this camera has specs that will last you the next 5 years, right? It has everything. Why do I say that, right? So first of all, it has a high megapixel sensor, right? 45 megapixels. Now, you don't really need that amount of resolution for wedding photography. Can you use it for wedding photography? Absolutely. I used to shoot with a Sony a7R3 and it was totally manageable for weddings. The files were bigger. I needed more SD cards, but in the end, it was manageable. It was doable. And I enjoyed pixel peeping the hell out of those photos, right? And having the resolution is awesome for cropping and just getting as much detail out of any possible shot. Now, the reality is you don't really need all that resolution for a wedding, right? Canon hasn't really announced if they're doing this, but Nikon's done a really cool thing with their D850 and their D810 where they've offered different size RAW files, right? So I think you can shoot that camera like at the 40 plus megapixel mode. You can shoot it like at a 30 megapixel mode, and even like at a 16 or 18, give or take. Like I think there's 3 different sizes: small RAW, medium RAW, and large RAW. And that makes it really cool because when you want the high resolution, you can just switch to that mode. And when you want low resolution, you can just switch to a lower resolution mode. So I'm hoping Canon kind of does something like that. They probably won't, but in the end, again, high resolution, it's not ideal now, but the future we're heading to, everything's going to be high resolution. So even though it's not needed now, I think it's future proofing yourself for the next few years, right? Now, this camera has IBIS. The R6 also has IBIS, and if you saw that video, I've mentioned that it's a nice to have for wedding photographers, but in reality, it's not that useful because you want to freeze the motion in weddings when people are moving. It doesn't matter if you can shoot at 1 second or 2 second exposures, you're going to get blurry shots, right? So you always want to have your shutter speed up there to freeze the motion. So yeah, IBIS is cool. It's nice to have. I don't think it's, again, nice to have. It's not absolutely needed for wedding photography. You do have two card slots, right? So you have an SD card slot and a CF Express card slot. This is good because you need that CF Express card to record that 8K media, right? Which we'll talk about in a second. And I'm super excited to see like what the buffer is on this camera, because if you're shooting with a CF Express card and a UHS 2 SD card slot, you should be able to just drive the hell out of that camera and never really hit a buffer, right? Because you have 2 high-speed cards. And again, now you have that redundancy, right? So you don't have to worry about if a card fails, what happens. The R6 also has the highest resolution EVF Canon's put out. It's very similar to the Panasonic S1 and the Leica SL2. So super excited to see what the EVF looks like. Again, it's nice to have that super high resolution. It makes it a lot easier to compose your photos and see what's in focus. But the lower resolution EVF on the R6 will also do the job, right? So you see a trend here, like the R5 is just overkill in every single possible thing, and it's not needed now, but it will be in the future, right? And like, if you think about cameras as an investment, you're future-proofing yourself with this camera. And of course, like you have the flippy screen, you have a weather-sealed body, like overall, like this camera has it all. As far as video goes, you have 8K RAW, which realistically, I'll probably use a handful of times just to try it out. What's really cool is you do have the option to shoot in 8K, and the files aren't as large. Now, they're still massive, right? But they're, I think, more manageable. So I do see myself using 8K for YouTube, trying to be like MKBHD for a day, and seeing what that looks like, right? Because I think that's a cool option to have. You do have 4K 120. Now, I think that's a killer feature, right? Like shooting 120 frames per second, especially for weddings, that's super nice. Now, having that super high res slow-mo, that'll be, I think, a cool feature to use. And I definitely see wedding videographers using that. because up to this point, even RED cameras have cropped to shoot 4K 120. So I think this feature right here is kind of game changing to have a full frame sensor, shoot 4K 120. I can't wait to see those results, right? And of course, you have all the standard features. So in the end, like, I think the Canon EOS R5 is complete overkill in every shape, way, and form. It's expensive as it should be, and I want it, right? As a photographer, as a gearhead, like, obviously I have incredible just gas, right? The gear acquisition syndrome. I need to have this camera. And I figured what I'm gonna do is, again, if you followed my channel, my wife is my second shooter, right? I usually like to shoot with 2 cameras and my wife shoots with 1 camera. So in my ideal setup, I'll have a Canon EOS R5 and an R6, and my wife will have an R6. So in the future, once we get past this COVID phase, right, when weddings start picking up for us again next year, I see ourselves having 2 R6s for the majority of our wedding work and R5 for, I think, the wedding portraits, stuff where I think high resolution is nice to have. And also, again, for the times where I want to shoot in higher res video, or I just, again, want to go the extra step, right? But in the end, my advice, if a photographer asks me for wedding photography, which camera to go to, I think the R6 is a sweet spot. If you have the money and you have crazy gas like myself, obviously the R5 is the ultimate camera. And I think on the pro side of things, if you buy an R5 today, you buy an R5 at the end of the year or next year, you're gonna have a camera that should last you years to come. From a hybrid wedding photographer's perspective, where you might be shooting photo and video, like, you don't really need anything else. Like, you're covering yourself with a high resolution sensor, you have a high frame rate, you have an amazing EVF, you have a flip out screen, which doesn't really matter for weddings, but throwing it in there, and you have every feature, right? So like, we don't even have 8K screens right now. Like, I think PixieSet, which is the photo delivery service I use to deliver photos, caps you out at 50 megapixels. So when you think about future proofing, the Canon EOS R5 does it. I think it's a investment that will last you a while. So if you have to save up every penny, in the end, like, this camera will last you for a long, long time. So those are my thoughts on the Canon EOS R5. I've already pre-ordered it. I will absolutely be doing an unboxing when it comes in. And I'll be comparing it to the Canon EOS R and the R6 and really putting them head to head to see if there is any other differences other than what we're seeing on the specs, right? So in the end, this is my perspective from a wedding photographer. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And as always, please like this video, please subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a good one. Peace.